The city had once been full of light, trade, and music. Now it was broken stone and falling steel. Fire burned on every street. The sky was dark with smoke, and the air was heavy with the smell of war. Humans and the alien race called the Thuri had fought here for weeks, and every corner of the city carried scars of their battles. Milan, a soldier in the human army, moved carefully through the ruins. His uniform was torn, his helmet cracked, and his face was covered in dust. He carried his rifle close, but his eyes moved faster than his hands. He had been cut off from his unit during the last clash, and now he was alone. His mission was to find a way back to the main group, but the ruins were alive with danger. Every broken wall could hide an enemy. Every shadow might hold a trap. Milan's boots pressed quietly on broken glass, and he kept his breath slow so he could hear better. He had seen too many soldiers lose their lives because they rushed. Now, patience was his strongest weapon. He passed what had once been a school. Its roof was gone, and the walls were full of holes from energy blasts. Small chairs and books lay scattered across the floor, burned and broken. Milan felt a sharp pain in his chest. He thought of the children who had once learned here. War had no care for the young. It destroyed everything, no matter who lived there. As he moved further into the city, Milan heard a faint sound. At first he thought it was just the wind moving through the broken buildings. But when he stopped and listened harder, the sound came again. It was soft, weak, and trembling. It was not the growl of a soldier or the roar of a weapon. It was more like a whimper. Milan followed the sound, moving slowly toward a half-collapsed shelter. The door was broken, and rubble covered most of the entrance. He knelt down and pushed away the smaller stones. The sound grew clearer. It was a cry. Inside the shelter, hidden in a corner, was a smoldery young one. Its body was thin, its arms trembling as it tried to stay upright. The child's skin was dark gray with a soft glow across its forehead. Its eyes were large, round, and filled with fear. When it saw Milan, it pressed itself against the wall, as if trying to become invisible. Milan froze. His orders were clear. The Thuri were the enemy. They had taken human lives, destroyed human cities, and pushed the war into every world the humans had built. Soldiers were told that no Thuri could be spared. Yet here was one, not a soldier but a child. It was not holding a weapon. It was not wearing armor. It was weak, hungry, and afraid. His hand tightened on his rifle, but his heart tightened more. He saw not an enemy but a young being who could not fight back. He thought of the burned school he had passed, the small chairs lying empty. He thought of what kind of person he would become if he pulled the trigger now. The young one whimpered again. Its small hands moved to its chest, as if to guard itself from him. Milan lowered his weapon. He removed the pack from his shoulder and took out a ration bar. He broke it into pieces and placed them carefully on the ground, not too close to the child, but close enough for it to reach. The child did not move at first. Its eyes watched him with deep mistrust. Milan sat down on the ground, laying his rifle aside, though still within reach. He took a small piece of the ration and ate it himself, then pushed another piece forward. Slowly, the young Thuri crawled forward and picked up the food. It sniffed the piece, then ate it quickly, as if afraid it would be taken away. Milan felt his chest grow lighter. He offered more food, and this time the child reached for it faster. Its eyes softened, though fear still remained. A sudden noise outside made Milan turn quickly. He heard heavy steps on the rubble. Enemy scouts were nearby. He pulled the child gently toward the shadows of the shelter and motioned for silence. His hand pressed against the wall, and he held his breath. Through the broken entrance, he saw two Thuri scouts pass by. They were tall, armored, and armed with energy rifles. Their voices were low and sharp as they spoke to each other, scanning the ruins for signs of human soldiers. If they looked inside, they would see him and the child. Both would be finished. Milan pressed his back to the wall and covered the child with his body. He stayed perfectly still, forcing even his heartbeat to slow. The scouts stopped for a moment, as if sensing something. One of them raised his weapon toward the shelter. Milan tightened his grip on his rifle but did not move. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, the scouts walked on, their footsteps fading into the distance. Milan let out the breath he had been holding. The child looked up at him with wide eyes, surprised that he had not run away and even more surprised that he had not called the scouts inside. In that moment, Milan understood. His mission had changed. He was no longer just a soldier trying to rejoin his unit. He was now a guardian, even if it was for a being that his own people called an enemy. The child reached out a small hand and touched his arm lightly, as if testing to see if he was real. Milan gave a faint smile and nodded. Whatever happened next, he would not leave this young one behind. The ruins were still full of war. Fire still burned in the distance. But inside that broken shelter, something different had begun. A choice had been made. Milan sat in the broken shelter, his back against the cold stone wall. The young Thuri had curled close, still weak and still afraid, but no longer hiding in the corner. It ate slowly from the ration bar he had left, chewing with small, careful bites. The glow on its forehead shimmered faintly, and its large eyes followed every movement Milan made. The soldier watched quietly, his thoughts heavy. He knew what his orders demanded. The human command had repeated it many times: the Thuri were dangerous, the Thuri wanted to take human colonies, and the Thuri could never be trusted. If he followed those orders, this moment would end quickly. But his heart refused. He had already crossed the line the moment he gave the child food. There was no turning back now. He looked at the young one. "You are not my enemy," he whispered, though he knew it did not understand his words. Yet somehow, the way the child's gaze softened made him believe the meaning had reached across the barrier of language. The ruins outside were still alive with danger. Milan could hear distant blasts, the heavy thud of weapons, and the rumble of collapsing buildings. Both armies were moving through the city. He had to make a decision. Stay here, and they would be found. Move with the child, and his own soldiers might see him as a traitor. Leave the child, and it would surely die alone. The choice pressed on him like the weight of the ruined ceiling above his head. For years he had fought because he was told to. But in this moment, no commander stood beside him. No officer shouted orders. It was only him, the ruins, and the small life in front of him. Milan stood up and checked the broken doorway. The street was quiet for now. He turned back to the child, who was watching with fear in its eyes, unsure of what he would do next. Slowly, he knelt down and held out his hand. "Come," he said softly. The child stared at his hand. Its small fingers trembled. For a long moment, it did not move. Then, as if gathering courage, it reached out and placed its hand in his. The touch was light, fragile, but real. Milan felt something shift inside him. This was no longer about orders. This was about honor. He lifted the child into his arms. It was lighter than he expected, thin from hunger. Its head rested against his chest, and its glowing forehead pressed close to his shoulder. For the first time in days, Milan felt that what he carried was more important than his rifle. As he stepped into the street, he kept to the shadows. His boots crunched softly on broken stone as he moved quickly from cover to cover. The ruins offered little safety, but he knew how to survive in enemy ground. He had done it before, though never while protecting a child. The sound of engines roared in the distance. Milan crouched low as human patrol vehicles moved along the far road. He could see the blue flags on the machines. These were his own people. He should have felt relief, but instead his chest tightened. If they saw him carrying a Thuri child, they would not ask questions. They would open fire. He waited until the patrol passed. The child clung tighter to his uniform, sensing his tension. Milan whispered calmly, "It is all right. We will move when it is safe." As he traveled deeper through the city, another danger came. Voices spoke in the alien tongue, rough and sharp. Milan froze and hid behind a fallen beam. Through a gap, he saw two Thuri soldiers scanning the area with glowing rifles. Their armor reflected the firelight from the burning buildings. They were searching for survivors, perhaps even searching for this very child. Milan's hand moved toward his rifle. He could fight them, but firing would bring more soldiers, human or Thuri. He looked at the child, who pressed its small hand against his chest. Its eyes were wide but not pleading. It trusted him now. When the soldiers drew closer, Milan made his choice. He wrapped the child in part of his torn cloak and lay flat against the rubble. He slowed his breathing and remained perfectly still, becoming part of the broken city. The soldiers walked past, their steps heavy, their voices fading as they moved away. Only when the silence returned did Milan rise again. He pressed his forehead briefly against the child's, a quiet gesture of reassurance. The young one blinked slowly, as if it understood. Night began to fall, and the firelight from the city painted the sky orange. Milan found another shelter, a half-broken shop with the roof still standing. Inside, he placed the child on a piece of cloth he pulled from his pack. He gave it water, lifting the canteen carefully to its mouth. The child drank greedily, then rested its head against the wall. Milan sat beside it, his rifle close at hand. His thoughts were heavy again. If his commanders learned of this, they would punish him. They would call him weak, or even worse, a traitor. But when he looked at the child, weak and small yet alive because of him, he knew the truth. He was not betraying his people. He was protecting what was innocent. The child's breathing grew steady as it drifted into sleep. Milan stayed awake, watching the entrance, every sound sharp in his ears. He had chosen a path that set him apart from both armies. He was one man against the tide of war. Yet he felt stronger than ever. For the first time in years of fighting, Milan believed he was doing something truly human. He was no longer a soldier who followed orders blindly. He was a guardian who chose his own path. In the silence of the ruined shop, he whispered again, "You are safe with me." The night outside was dangerous, but inside, a bond had begun. Milan did not know what tomorrow would bring. He only knew that he would face it with this child at his side. And that choice had already changed everything. The next morning, the city was quiet but tense. Smoke still rose from the ruins, and broken buildings cast long shadows in the early sunlight. Milan had slept little. He kept one eye open, listening for sounds of soldiers, both human and Thuri. The young Thuri child slept beside him, curled in a small blanket Milan had found. Its soft breathing was steady, Yet Milan knew this peace would not last long. He packed their small belongings carefully, keeping the child protected under his arm. Every step was cautious as he moved through the debris. His mind was alert, thinking of escape routes, hiding spots, and possible dangers. Even in this fragile calm, he felt the weight of what he had chosen. Protecting the enemy's young was a path no soldier would understand. As they moved through the street, a strange sound made Milan stop. It was not the usual clatter of debris or distant explosions. It was a low hum, steady and deep. He looked up and saw a figure approaching from the far end of the street. The figure was large, taller than any other soldier he had seen. Its movements were calm but purposeful, almost regal. Milan froze, instinctively holding the child closer. The figure's glowing eyes scanned the ruins, and Milan felt a strange awareness in those eyes, as if the being could see through every crack in the stone. His heart pounded, and he held his breath. The figure stopped a short distance away. Its skin shimmered with patterns of light, more intense than the child's soft glow. It spoke in the Thuri language, clear and commanding, though Milan could not understand the words. Its tone carried authority and power, and Milan realized instantly who it was. This was no ordinary soldier. This was the child's mother. She was Queen Arana, leader of the Thuri forces. Stories of her cruelty and skill in battle had reached human ears for years. Yet here she was, standing calmly, searching, and most importantly, not attacking. Milan stepped forward slightly, keeping the child protected behind him. "We mean no harm," he said, though he doubted the queen could understand him. The child stirred but did not cry, sensing his calm. Queen Arana's eyes focused on the young one. She knelt slightly, her massive form bending with grace. The child recognized her instantly, raising a trembling hand. For a moment, it looked as if relief might wash over its small face, but then the child glanced at Milan. Milan met the queen's gaze. There was no fear in his eyes, only resolve. He held the child firmly, showing that he would not let anyone take it by force. Queen Arana observed him silently, her glowing patterns shifting slightly with what seemed to be curiosity. She did not attack, nor did she speak again. The child looked from one guardian to the other, unsure whom to trust. Milan whispered softly to the child, "It is her. The one who cares for you. She will not hurt you because I will not let her." The queen's presence was overwhelming. Every soldier he had ever faced could not compare to the weight of her authority. Yet Milan did not falter. He had chosen this path, and now he would see it through. Queen Arana extended a large hand toward the child. The child hesitated, glancing at Milan one last time before crawling quickly into the queen's embrace. Milan stayed still, watching every movement, ready to act if needed. The queen held her young one close, her large eyes scanning Milan again. In that silent exchange, Milan felt her questioning. Why had he protected her child? Why had he risked everything to save an enemy's life? He met her gaze without flinching. He spoke slowly, "The child is innocent. It did not fight. It did not choose this war. I could not leave it to die." Queen Arana's gaze softened slightly, though her posture remained strong. She did not lower her hand, nor did she speak more. Instead, she studied him carefully, as if trying to understand the strange human who could be so brave yet so compassionate. Milan felt a tension in the air. Any mistake could end everything. Yet the queen made no sudden move. She simply stood there, holding her child, measuring him. Her guards began to appear from the shadows, heavily armed, scanning the area. They were ready to attack if needed, but their leader gave no command. The child, safe in its mother's arms, looked at Milan again. Its large eyes seemed to plead silently, as if asking him to trust her as he had chosen to. Milan nodded once, slowly. He would not harm her, and he hoped she would not harm him. Queen Arana finally stepped forward, a small but deliberate movement. She lowered her weapon and motioned for her guards to relax. The energy in the air shifted slightly. Milan could feel the tension easing, but he also knew that nothing had been fully decided yet. The queen spoke in her language again, slower this time. The tone was not anger, but curiosity. Milan could not understand her words, yet he felt their meaning. She was questioning his choices, examining his courage, and testing his intentions. He replied simply, in the language he had learned from intercepted communications, "I protect the child. I will not let harm come to it. That is all I can do." Queen Arana tilted her head slightly. For the first time, her glowing patterns shimmered with a lighter tone. She studied Milan's eyes, seeing truth in them. He was not lying. He was not afraid. He had chosen a path of protection, not war. For a long moment, they stood like that, observing each other. The city around them burned and fell, yet in this small corner, a fragile understanding began to grow. Milan had shown courage, compassion, and honor. The queen had power, intelligence, and authority. Somehow, in this meeting, their fates had begun to intertwine. Finally, Queen Arana lowered her gaze toward the child and then back to Milan. She did not speak more, but the gesture was clear. She would not harm him. Not yet. The choice was his to continue protecting the child, and she would watch him. Milan exhaled slowly, though he remained vigilant. He had faced death many times in his life, but this moment was different. He was not fighting a soldier. He was not leading an army. He was standing in front of the most powerful enemy he had ever known, and somehow, through courage and compassion, he had earned her pause. The child nestled in its mother's arms, and Milan took a small step back. He understood that the journey ahead would be dangerous, that trust between him and Queen Arana would be tested, and that war had not ended. Yet he felt a strange hope. In the ruins of the city, with firelight dancing on broken stone, Milan realized that his choices had already begun to change the story of the war. One act of protection had brought him face to face with power, authority, and something deeper than simple survival. He would continue to protect the child, and somehow, he knew that Queen Arana's eyes would follow every step he took. For the first time, Milan understood that courage was not only in battle. Courage was in the choice to protect, even when the world told you to destroy. The ruined city remained quiet for a few hours after Queen Arana's arrival. Milan and the Yungthari child stayed in the half-broken shop, while the queen and her guards observed them from a safe distance. The air was tense, heavy with unspoken questions. Milan had never faced such a powerful enemy, nor had he ever met a creature whose authority could command silence with just a gaze. Yet he did not feel fear, only focus. He knew what he had to do: protect the child and prove that he could be trusted. The child stirred, blinking at the faint light filtering through the broken windows. It looked toward Milan and then toward its mother. Its small hands reached for him instinctively, showing the bond that had formed in the shelter. Milan smiled softly and crouched beside it, offering a hand to guide it closer. Queen Arana watched carefully, her glowing forehead patterns shifting slowly. Her gaze was sharp but thoughtful. She did not speak, yet Milan felt the weight of her attention. He understood that she was assessing him, judging every movement, every choice he made. This was not a simple enemy, this was intelligence and power combined, observing him for meaning. Milan spoke gently to the child, "We are safe for now. You are with your mother, and I will not leave." The child's fingers touched his arm briefly, a quiet acknowledgement of trust. Milan felt a surge of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them. Protecting the young one had become more than duty, it was a matter of honor. Hours passed without incident. The city around them was still dangerous, yet the presence of the queen and her guards kept human patrols away. Milan used the time to prepare a small area for the child, using cloth, broken boards, and debris to create a place where it could rest more comfortably. The queen did not interfere, but she did not leave either. Her eyes followed every action, reading his intentions. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and measured. Though Milan could not understand the words, the tone carried meaning. It was not anger. It was inquiry. She questioned him silently, testing whether he would act with honesty or deception. Milan met her gaze without fear. He understood the importance of the moment. This was the first true communication between human and the Re, not through language, but through actions and courage. Milan held the child closer and stepped slightly forward, showing that he was open and unarmed. His eyes met the queen's, steady and honest. He wanted her to see that he did not intend harm. His life had been spent in battle, following orders, yet here, he acted from choice rather than command. He had chosen compassion over duty, and he would not regret it. The queen's gaze softened slightly. She lowered her posture, a subtle shift that showed she was considering trust. Her glowing patterns dimmed briefly, signaling thought rather than aggression. Milan felt a small spark of hope. This fragile understanding, though tentative, was growing. The child, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, crawled toward Milan and then back to its mother, unsure of where to settle. The queen's hand moved slowly, a gesture of reassurance. Milan nodded once, silently acknowledging the peace. It was delicate, fragile, but it was real. Suddenly, the sound of distant footsteps made them all tense. Human soldiers were approaching the area. Milan instinctively moved in front of the child, ready to protect it if necessary. The queen's guards shifted, preparing for possible conflict. Yet there was no immediate attack. The humans passed without noticing the group, moving through a different street of the ruined city. Milan exhaled slowly, releasing the tension he had held. The child leaned against him briefly, and he felt its warmth. He realized that in a world consumed by war, these small moments of trust and safety were rare. He had created a bond not just with the child, but with the queen herself. Their fragile understanding was delicate, yet it held the promise of change. Queen Arana spoke again, her voice lower this time. The tone suggested curiosity and calculation. Milan did not respond with words, but with calm presence. He remained steady, showing that his choices were consistent. Actions spoke louder than language. Protecting the child had demonstrated his values more clearly than any speech could. Hours turned into the afternoon. Milan helped the child eat a small meal, sharing part of his remaining rations. The queen watched silently, occasionally stepping closer to observe. Her guards remained near, vigilant but restrained. The city around them burned and fell, yet in this small space, a new form of communication had begun, a conversation of trust, courage, and mutual respect. Milan realized that this understanding was fragile not because of weakness, but because of power. Both he and Queen Arana held strength in different forms. He had courage, determination, and moral clarity. She had authority, intelligence, and the ability to command life and death. Their bond was fragile because it required balance. Any misstep could destroy it. As evening approached, the queen moved closer to the child, kneeling to offer a gentle touch. The child relaxed slightly, pressing its forehead against hers. Milan stood a few steps back, watching silently. This was a rare moment of peace, a connection across worlds. The queen's presence was no longer threatening, it was protective, cautious, and attentive. Milan spoke softly to her, though she could not understand the words. "I will keep it safe," he said, his voice steady. "I will not harm it. I will not leave it behind." His gaze held hers, showing sincerity. Queen Arana did not respond with words, but with a subtle nod. It was enough. It signaled acknowledgement, not complete trust, but acceptance of his intentions. Milan felt a sense of relief, though he knew the path ahead would be difficult. The fragile understanding they had built today could be shattered at any moment, yet it was real and meaningful. Night began to fall, casting long shadows across the ruins. Milan set up a small fire outside the shop for warmth, careful not to draw attention. The child sat quietly beside him, tired from the day's events. Queen Arana remained near, her posture calm but alert. Her guards stood at a distance, silent watchers. Milan realized that he had crossed a line from soldier to protector. His choices had challenged the rules of war, yet they had created a possibility for peace. The queen's presence, once a threat, was now a silent partnership. Their fragile understanding held the potential to change the future, if they could maintain it. In the quiet of the ruined city, with the fire casting soft light on broken stone, Milan allowed himself a moment of hope. He had chosen compassion over obedience, protection over destruction, and in doing so, he had begun to form a bond that might outlast the war itself. He looked at the child, then at the queen, and whispered softly, "We will find a way through this. Together, we will survive." The child blinked slowly, trusting him completely. Queen Arana's glowing patterns shifted gently, signaling thought rather than threat. Milan understood that this fragile understanding was the first step in a long journey, one that could redefine the meaning of courage, trust, and humanity in a universe torn by conflict. The city had grown quiet after the fragile understanding between Milan and Queen Arana. Fires still burned in distant streets, and smoke painted the sky in dull gray and orange. The ruins were full of danger, yet in this small corner, peace had arrived for a brief moment. Milan and the child stayed in the half-collapsed shop, while the queen and her guards remained nearby, observing silently. Milan had prepared a small space for the child, with cloth and broken boards forming a makeshift bed. The child rested quietly, occasionally glancing at him for reassurance. Milan's rifle lay close at hand, though he had not needed it since the queen's arrival. His thoughts were heavy. Protecting the child had changed everything. He was no longer only a soldier, he had become a guardian, standing between life and death. Suddenly, the distant sound of human soldiers brought tension back into the air. Their boots clattered over broken stone, and the sharp orders of commanders could be heard in the distance. Milan immediately moved in front of the child, ready to act if necessary. Queen Arana's guards tensed as well, shifting slightly to intercept any threat. From the far street, a squad of human soldiers emerged. They were Milan's own unit, searching for him after he had gone missing in the previous battle. When they saw him standing near the queen and the child, their weapons raised instinctively. "Stop," one shouted. "Step aside, soldier." Milan froze. His chest tightened. He knew the soldiers would not understand. To them, carrying the Yungthari was an act of betrayal. They had orders to secure all enemy survivors, not protect them. One step in the wrong direction, and the conflict would erupt. Queen Arana's gaze shifted toward the humans. Her glowing patterns flared briefly, signaling her readiness. Her guards moved slightly forward, but she held them back with a subtle gesture. The queen's calm yet commanding presence was a warning to both sides. No violence would happen unless she allowed it. Milan raised his hand slowly. "Do not attack," he called to his unit. "The child is safe. I am protecting it. That is my choice." The soldiers hesitated, unsure of how to respond. They had never seen Milan act this way. He had always followed orders strictly, yet here he was, defending the enemy's young. One of the soldiers stepped forward, frowning. "Milan, what are you doing? You are a soldier. This is the enemy." Milan did not falter. "It is a child. Innocent. It does not fight. I will not let it die." His voice was firm, carrying authority beyond rank. The soldiers exchanged glances, uncertain. Their training and instinct told them to act, but the courage and calm in Milan's tone made them pause. The child looked up from Milan's side, large eyes wide with fear. It pressed itself closer to him. Milan placed a protective arm around it, showing both his humans and the queen that he would not allow harm to come to the young one. Queen Arana spoke in her language, slower and deliberate this time. Her tone was not anger, but a question. She was testing Milan's consistency. He met her gaze without fear. His choices were clear, and his actions had been honest from the start. The human commander stepped closer, scanning the child and the queen. "Step aside, Milan. You are endangering this unit." Milan shook his head. "I will not step aside. I will protect this child, and I will not harm anyone who does not deserve it." His eyes were steady, his voice unwavering. The commander hesitated. He had known Milan for years, trained alongside him, fought beside him. This was not the same soldier who had followed orders without question. This Milan had chosen courage, honor, and compassion over blind obedience. The realization gave the commander pause. Queen Arana slowly moved her child into the center between herself and Milan, showing the humans that she trusted him. Her glowing patterns shifted softly, signaling calm and authority. Her guards relaxed slightly, though they remained alert. The humans studied the scene. The child was innocent. Milan had acted to protect, not to harm. Queen Arana, a powerful enemy, had accepted his presence and his choice. The commander lowered his weapon slowly, though caution remained. Milan's chest eased slightly, but he did not relax completely. The tension of being caught between two worlds, human and the soldier and guardian, was still present. He understood that any wrong move could destroy the fragile understanding that had begun to form. The child moved slightly, pressing itself against Milan's leg. He knelt down gently, allowing it to rest its head on his shoulder. His eyes met the queen's again. In that silent exchange, they shared understanding. Both knew that this moment was fragile, yet meaningful. The human commander finally spoke, his voice measured. "Milan, I cannot fully agree with what you are doing, but I see the truth in your actions. The child is safe. No one will attack." Milan nodded slowly. "Thank you. This is not about loyalty to one side or another. This is about doing what is right." The soldiers lowered their weapons and moved back slightly. The queen's presence remained commanding, yet calm. She had allowed Milan to prove himself, and her trust in him had grown, though cautiously. As evening approached, the city around them seemed to pause. Fires burned faintly in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of smoke and dust. Milan helped the child eat a small meal, sharing part of his rations. Queen Arana watched silently, her posture calm but alert. Her eyes occasionally met Milan's, acknowledging the bond that had formed between him and her young one. Milan realized that his actions had changed the way both sides viewed him. He was no longer only a soldier of the human army. He had become a protector, a bridge between two worlds at war. The child, once vulnerable and alone, was now safe because of his courage and choice. Queen Arana spoke again, this time slower, almost a whisper. Milan did not understand the words, but he felt their meaning. She was questioning, evaluating, and beginning to respect his intentions. The fragile understanding they had shared for days was growing stronger, yet still delicate. Night fell fully, casting long shadows across the ruined streets. Milan set up a small fire for warmth, careful not to attract attention. The child sat quietly beside him, tired from the day's events. Queen Arana remained nearby, her guards standing at a distance, alert but restrained. Milan looked at both of them, understanding the importance of his role. He was caught between two worlds, human and the soldier and guardian, but he had chosen the path of courage, compassion, and honor. This choice had brought him into contact with power, intelligence, and responsibility far beyond what he had ever imagined. In the quiet of the ruined city, with the fire casting soft light on broken stone, Milan whispered softly to the child, "We will face this together. We will survive." The child blinked slowly, trusting him completely. Queen Arana's glowing patterns shifted gently, signaling thought rather than threat. Milan understood that being caught between two worlds was not a weakness, but a responsibility. He had chosen protection over obedience, courage over fear, and trust over doubt. And in doing so, he had begun to build a bond that could change the course of war itself. The city was quiet but heavy with tension. Smoke rose from the distant ruins, and the sun painted the sky in dull orange and gray. Milan stood with the child at his side, and Queen Arana watched them silently. The fragile understanding between human and the had held for days, but now a decision needed to be made that could change everything. Milan knew both sides were waiting for a signal. His human unit, though reluctant, had begun to understand his actions, yet they still questioned his loyalty. The Three, led by Queen Arana, were cautious, watching him carefully. One wrong step, one wrong word, and the fragile trust could shatter. The child looked up at Milan, its small eyes wide and trusting. He placed a gentle hand on its head, feeling the soft warmth of its skin. "We have to do what is right," he whispered. "We cannot let war destroy more than it already has." Queen Arana stepped closer, her presence commanding yet calm. Her glowing patterns shifted slowly, showing thought and evaluation. She did not speak at first. Instead, she observed Milan, as if weighing his heart against the weight of the worlds around them. Milan took a deep breath. He knew what he had to do. He stepped forward, placing himself between the child and the queen. His eyes met hers. "The war has gone on too long," he said firmly. "It is time to stop the killing. If we do not try, nothing will change. Too many lives have been lost already. Too many cities burned." The queen's gaze remained steady, her glowing patterns intensifying briefly. She spoke in her language, slow and deliberate. Milan did not understand the words completely, but he felt their meaning. She was questioning, testing, and seeking proof that his intentions were true. Milan held his stance, his voice calm and confident. I protect the child because it is innocent. I protect life because it matters. If we can see that even one child is more important than orders or pride, then perhaps the war can end. For a moment, silence hung over the ruined city. Even the wind seemed to pause. Both sides waited, watching the exchange. Then, a faint murmur came from the human soldiers. The commander stepped forward, cautious yet thoughtful. Milan is right, he said slowly. We have followed orders, but we have lost too much already. Perhaps it is time to consider a truce. The three guards shifted slightly, but Queen Arana raised her hand, signaling them to remain still. Her attention remained on Milan, assessing whether he was sincere. The child looked between them all, sensing the change in the air. Milan knelt slightly, placing his hands gently on the child's shoulders. We cannot undo what has happened, he said softly, but we can choose a different path from here. One choice can change everything. Queen Arana's glowing patterns shifted again, softer this time. She spoke once more, slower, deliberate, almost a whisper. Milan could not understand every word, but he felt the meaning. She was offering a possibility. She was willing to consider peace. Milan looked up at her, his expression steady. I accept. I will continue to protect the child, and I will honor your choice if you honor mine. Together, we can show that there is another way. The commander of the human soldiers lowered his weapon fully. The tension that had filled the city for days seemed to lift slightly. The soldiers glanced at each other, understanding that they were witnessing something unusual. A single act of courage had changed the course of their mission. Queen Arana stepped forward, moving closer to Milan and the child. Her voice was low but clear this time, and though he did not understand every word, her gestures were unmistakable. She was granting him trust. She would not harm him. The child was safe. And more than that, the possibility of peace had begun. Milan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had acted with courage, and now both sides recognized the value of his choices. It was not strength in numbers or weapons that had changed the situation, it was courage, honor, and compassion. He realized that humans could rise above orders and fear, and even the enemy could recognize the truth in those choices. The child moved slightly, pressing itself against Milan's leg. He knelt down, holding it close. Its trust in him had never wavered, and now it was mirrored in the Queen's cautious respect. Milan looked at Queen Arana and spoke again, softly. This can be the start of something new. A chance to stop the fighting. The Queen inclined her head slightly, acknowledging him. Her glowing patterns softened, and for the first time, she showed a hint of approval. Milan understood that trust was being extended not fully, but enough to make a difference. The child blinked slowly, sensing the change in the air. The human commander stepped closer to Milan. You have risked everything to do what is right, he said. I cannot fully approve yet, but I see your courage. It is not weakness. It is honor. Milan nodded slowly. I will continue to protect what is innocent. That is all I can do. I hope it is enough to show that peace is possible. For hours, the group remained in the ruins, neither side taking aggressive action. Queen Arana and Milan exchanged careful glances. Trust was forming slowly, like fragile ice beginning to solidify. The child remained between them, a symbol of innocence and the future. As the sun began to set, Milan felt a deep sense of calm. The war had not ended completely, but a choice had been made that could stop further destruction. Courage had shifted the balance. Compassion had created the possibility for peace. And trust, though fragile, had begun to form a bridge between two worlds that had long been enemies. Night fell fully, and the city grew quiet. Fires burned faintly in the distance, but the tension that had filled the ruins now felt lighter. Milan stood with the child at his side, looking at Queen Arana. Their eyes met, and he understood that a decision had been made that would change the course of their lives. The child moved closer, trusting him completely. Milan placed a gentle hand on its head, feeling the warmth and softness. "We have done what we could today," he whispered. "Tomorrow will be different, but today we have chosen a better path." Queen Arana's glowing patterns shifted softly, signaling thought rather than threat. Milan understood that their fragile understanding had grown stronger. The possibility of peace had been born not from weapons, but from courage, honor, and compassion. And in that moment, Milan realized something profound. True strength was not in the power to destroy, but in the power to protect, to choose what is right, and to stand firm even when the world demanded otherwise. The child closed its eyes, resting against him. The queen remained nearby, vigilant yet calm. Milan knew that tomorrow would bring challenges, but the decision made today had already set the course for something new. For the first time, he felt the weight of true responsibility not as a soldier, but as a human capable of courage, honor, and the power to change the future. In the ruins of the city, with nightfall surrounding them, Milan, the child, and Queen Arana stood together. The war had not ended completely, but a choice had been made that could prevent further destruction. Courage and compassion had triumphed over fear and orders. And in that fragile moment, hope had been born. The ruined city was calm as the first light of morning spread across broken buildings. Smoke still rose from distant fires, but the streets that had once echoed with war were now quieter. Milan stood at the entrance of the half-collapsed shop, the child at his side, and Queen Arana near them, watching silently. The fragile understanding that had begun days before now felt stronger, yet it remained delicate. The child stirred, blinking in the soft sunlight. Its small fingers reached for Milan, showing trust that had grown steadily. Milan knelt down, smiling gently, and guided the child to his shoulder. "Good morning," he whispered. "Today is a new day." Queen Arana's glowing patterns shifted softly as she observed them. There was no anger, only focus. She had been a queen of war for many years, commanding armies and making impossible choices. Yet now, she was here quietly, respecting the courage and compassion of a human who had chosen to protect her young one. Milan stood, holding the child close. He knew that the days ahead would still be dangerous. The war had not ended completely, and both sides remained cautious. Yet he felt hope. For the first time, he understood that one choice, one act of protection could create trust, even between enemies. The queen stepped forward, her massive form moving gracefully through the ruins. She held the child carefully in her arms and spoke in her language. Milan did not understand her words fully, but he sensed their meaning. She was acknowledging him. She was showing that she trusted his intentions, and that the bond between them, fragile though it was, mattered. Milan nodded slowly. "We will continue to protect what is innocent," he said softly. "That is all we can do, and it is enough." The child looked up at him, then at its mother. A small smile appeared on its face, showing comfort and relief. It understood, even without words, that it was safe. Milan felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had protected the innocent, even when the world expected him to do otherwise. He had chosen courage over fear, and honor over obedience. The city around them remained broken and dangerous, yet the three of them stood together, forming a small sanctuary in the middle of chaos. Queen Arana's guards relaxed slightly, watching without aggression. The humans had also moved back, leaving space, recognizing that this was a moment of understanding, not a moment for conflict. Milan knew that the war had not ended, but he also knew that something had changed. One choice could alter the path of countless lives. By protecting the child, he had shown that humans could rise above fear and orders. By respecting his actions, the queen had shown that even the enemy could value courage and honor. The child moved closer to Milan, resting its head against his chest. He held it gently, feeling its warmth and trust. Queen Arana watched, then placed a hand on the child's shoulder, a silent sign of shared protection. Milan realized that this bond between him, the child, and the queen was stronger than any weapon or army. It was built on trust, courage, and compassion. Hours passed, and the ruins seemed to grow quieter. The fire in the distance burned low, and the smoke began to clear. Milan walked slowly through the streets with the child, while Queen Arana followed. They passed broken buildings and shattered streets, yet the small group moved without fear. The humans and the three were watching, yet neither side acted aggressively. Something new had begun, a tentative peace built on understanding. Milan spoke softly to the child. "We have done what is right," he said. "We have chosen to protect, not destroy. That choice matters more than any command or order." The child blinked slowly, trusting him completely. Queen Arana's glowing patterns shifted again, signaling thought and attention. She moved closer to Milan and spoke in her language, deliberate and calm. Though he did not understand every word, he could feel the meaning. She was acknowledging him as a protector, not a soldier. She was showing respect for his courage and honor. Milan nodded in understanding. "We will continue to protect each other," he said. "We will show that courage and compassion can survive, even in war." The child reached out and touched Milan's face gently, then pressed against its mother. It had learned trust from both sides, and that trust now formed a bond that could not break easily. Milan felt that bond deeply. It was a connection that went beyond human and beyond soldier and queen. It was a bond of life, of protection, and of courage. As the day progressed, more soldiers from both sides appeared at a distance, observing quietly. They had seen Milan's actions, the queen's acknowledgement, and the child's safety. They could not deny the change that had occurred. The human commander approached cautiously, then stopped and looked at Milan. "You have done what few would have dared," the commander said. "You have shown courage, honor, and compassion. Perhaps this is the start of something different." Milan nodded. "It is a start," he said. "We cannot undo the past, but we can protect the future." Queen Arana stepped forward and extended her hand slightly toward Milan. It was a gesture of respect, not surrender, showing that their bond was recognized and valued. Milan lowered his hand to meet hers, a silent agreement that trust and protection would continue. The child smiled and clung to both of them, showing that the bond was complete. In the ruins of a city torn by war, the three of them stood together, a symbol of hope, courage, and the possibility of peace. As night fell, Milan, the child, and Queen Arana settled near the half-collapsed shop. The fires in the distance burned low, and the stars began to appear in the sky. The child rested peacefully between them, trusting completely in the protection of both Milan and its mother. Milan reflected on everything that had happened. He had risked his life to protect innocence. He had faced judgment from both sides and had chosen courage and compassion over fear and obedience. His choices had created a fragile understanding, a bond that bridged two worlds at war. Queen Arana watched silently, her glowing patterns soft and gentle. She had recognized his bravery and his honor. She had seen that he could protect life even when the world demanded destruction. That recognition mattered, not only for the child but for the future of their people. Milan held the child close, feeling warmth and trust. "We have done what is right," he whispered. "This bond cannot break, no matter what comes." Queen Arana inclined her head slightly, a silent agreement. She had seen the power of courage and compassion. She had seen that trust, once earned, could bridge even the deepest divides. The child slept peacefully, held safely between Milan and its mother. In that quiet moment, the ruined city seemed less dangerous, less broken. The bond between human, child, and queen had created a space of hope in the midst of war. Milan knew that tomorrow would bring challenges, that both sides might still be cautious and wary. Yet he also knew that this bond could not break. Courage, compassion, and honor had formed a connection stronger than fear or orders. It was a bond that could survive the chaos of war and perhaps even change the future. As the night deepened, Milan whispered again to the child, softly, "We will face the future together. We will protect each other. And nothing will break this bond." The child slept peacefully, Queen Arana remained vigilant but calm, and Milan stood silently, watching over them both. In the ruins of a city torn by war, courage, honor, and compassion had created a bond that could not break.